Hi, it's Ed, and I welcome you to Global TV Talk Show again. I want to introduce our sponsors. Global TV Talk Show is co-sponsored by Porchlight Rental and Destination Services. That's porchlightrental.com, porchlightrental.com. Also by cubemonk.com. That's cubemonk.com. It's an innovation in also good packaging, freight forwarding, wonderful invention. And by the relocation management company, AIRS Relocation. That's AIRES, airs.com. Thank you for being a sponsor of Global TV Talk Show. Hi, this is Ed Cohen again, broadcast host of Global TV Talk Show. I'm in San Diego. We got a really cool show today. First off, Sandrine Bardot, based in Dubai, International Compensation and Benefits, and has a great publication and talk show now on Compensation Insider, right?
Yes.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Stephen Howard is a well-known author, Caliente Leadership and Consulting. Hope I said that right, Stephen Howard. Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you back on the show. Rigoberto is coming from Crown Mobility in Mexico City. Hola.
Hola, hello everybody.
Yeah, great. Welcome. And Mark Naidicz, retired pharmaceutical executive, coming to us from Milwaukee, Chicago area. Upcoming, we're bound to have 2 or 3 additional very cool people, but we're going to begin now. So let's just start immediately with Stephen Howard, author, Caliente Leadership, and you have a new series, is that correct?
I have a new YouTube channel series, and I've also got a new book out. Both happen in the month of June.
You're busy. Okay, tell us about the book, please.
Well, the book is talks about how stress and anxiety impacts your decision making. It's a follow up to my previous book, which was called Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes. So the Better Thinking book was aimed at leaders, and the how stress and impacts your decision making is really for everybody. And so it really just talks about how we're all in stress these days. I mean, and we have to worry about prolonged stress. So that's what the books are about.
So what about working from home and all this business? And how do senior managers manage when people are not in front of them?
Well, it's difficult, but and in addition to it's the same skills. They just have to use the skills slightly different. But I think also because we've been in such a prolonged lockdown across the world, leaders really need to start with empathy. I mean, the leaders I'm coaching, the one-on-one coaching sessions I've been having in the last 6 or 8 weeks, I tell everyone, your first question should be, how's your family? Not how you are, not how the project is. Ask about the family, number one. How is the family coping? How's everything going? And also then if you know they have children, how are the children coping with being educated from home? Then ask the employee how they're doing, and then get into, let's talk about work. Let's talk about business.
Okay, so what if the employee says, I'm a wreck. I can't stand my spouse and the kids are making me crazy and I can't focus on work?
Well, I think this is where, particularly work for a larger corporation, this is where the HR department really can be a valuable asset, is to say, well, you know what? Thank you for bringing that up. We have some policies, we have some options available to you through our policy. Would you be okay for you if I called the HR on your behalf and gave them a heads up and asked somebody to give you a call? Or would you like me to give you the number for you to call somebody? So, people are going to be reluctant to call themselves often. So I've been telling leaders, look, you've got to be proactive here. You've got to take care of the employee, even if the employee is hesitant to take care of themselves.
Let's go to Mark Naidicz, VP HR with AppV. So does this sound real?
Absolutely. I would piggyback on Stephen's comment about not only HR, but I also think that, giving some, tools to our leaders so they can identify these issues and just helping them through, what are a few of the things. I love the questioning that he put in there. I also think that, it's just very much an opportunity for leaders to be very focused on listening and ensuring that they're spending the time, as Stephen said, to find out how they're doing, but get deeper into not just, when we always ask the question, right? How you doing?
Yeah.
And people just gloss over it. No, how are you? How is it? And dig deeper and keep asking that question, right? So I think that's the thing that I find as I talk to leaders as well, that, you have to be really authentic. You have to listen, and you have to have some humility around not having the answers and just being able to say, hey, you're right. If there's some things going on, why don't you take a little bit of time? A lot of times people think they have to work around the clock, and it's the lines have been blurred greatly. So now they need to make sure that they take their time to rest and recharge.
Yeah, Sandrine, from your experience, please add.
Yeah, I think for me, as a specialized compensation and benefits, this is an area where we can really put in place the policies and the programs that will support the employees, such as an employee assistance program, mental wellness support, all this kind of stuff in flexible or non-flexible benefits packages. I think this is important, and communicating about it so that people can access it without necessarily the employer knowing about it. Because a lot of time when we are talking about stress, emotional reactions to situation, and we've all been in the last few months in a very stressful and emotional environment, people don't necessarily want to show it in the workplace. So it's important that they understand that if they go to the EAP, or if they have a telemedicine consultation or something like that, the employer does not know about it, only receives aggregated and anonymous statistics about usage of the service, but does not receive Mr. X called on this topic at that time, for example. So that's important as well.
Let's go to Rigoberto in the relocation business in Mexico. I'm sure you're seeing a lot of stress stuff going on.
Certainly. I think, at least from the Crown perspective, for us, we have two types of business, which is the household goods, and the other is part of the mobility, which are destination services. So, we have seen all type of moves, and there is some kind of uncertainty within the market, but we are moving forward with other countries which are having similar situations. And currently, we are performing packing services, taking the necessary precautions, and also some destination services for all the expatriates.
Great, thank you. Stephen, back to you. In your consulting, for instance, in Mexico, where you're going tomorrow, what kind of companies are you dealing with there?
Difference or a combination of some small, medium enterprise organizations, and then I do most of my classroom trainings with large multinationals. Of course, classroom training is going to go away for at least the next 18 to 24 months. But the one-on-one coaching I'm doing is mostly with small, medium enterprise people, a mid-level supervisor, department heads, vice president levels, things of that nature.
Yeah, and so they're buying into your insight on just how to relieve stress?
I think they are. I mean, particularly when I can show them that it's a process. Stress impacts decision making. Decision making impacts the bottom line. Once you got them understanding that, then I've got their attention. Quite frankly, I used to talk to them about controlling stress because it was all about their brain health, their long-term brain health. And it was like, well, I'll worry about that when I retire. But then as I started showing how the stress impacts decisions can impact your bottom line. And, now I'll listen to you.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I think they are, what Mark's talking about, I think the empathy level, I think people haven't been taught how to be empathetic in the workplace. And I think just when I'm coaching people and just little tips, for instance, I've got a guy I coach every other Thursday at 10 a.m. And, back in, I think, late April, early May, I had a conversation with him. I said, hey, listen, are your kids doing homeschooling? He says, yeah, they're in the other room right now on the internet. And we were having some connectivity issues between him and I said, you know what? And I said, and what's your wife doing right now? And she was also on the internet. I said, look, if your kids are in school, one of you should probably be supervised. Would you like to reschedule our coaching sessions? I mean, and he said, I'd love to. I didn't want to ask because I know you're so busy. And I said, look, we all have to be kind to each other. We all have to help each other out. So from now on, we've been doing them at 2:00 in the afternoon. And so now the kids aren't using, they're not in school. They're not on the internet. The wife now can I think the kids and wife are having lunch while he and I are doing our coaching session now. So you've got to be flexible. You got to be agile. And I think people don't understand how that is empathetic.
And they're sometimes afraid to speak.
They are afraid to speak, even in the cases of to their bosses. In my case, I'm a consultant, but the company's paying for it. So, they see me as, the guru or the expert. I mean, that's why you hire a coach, I guess. And they're being courteous, but people have to also learn to speak up and say, look, as Mark said, look, I'm under stress. I'm underwater. I've got issues. I need some help here. I'm glad you asked, sort of thing. And
That's really
if we're
a good
open
point.
and receptive, if we're open and receptive, I think people will tell us. If we sort of say, like, everyone says, how you doing? Good. Okay, let's move on to business. But no, really, how are you really doing? What are the issues you're facing? Ask some really good questions, dive deeper, and they'll share it with you.
Compensation and benefits, right, Sandrine? I mean,
I think
this is really key.
I agree with Stephen and Mark here. I think when people start to care and maybe also sometimes share a little bit of their own vulnerabilities, especially if they're the one in the position of relative power in the relationship. If we assume that the relationship is between an employee and their manager, for example, that helps a lot. And that creates long-term engagement also. How can I say, what's the word I'm looking at? People are not going to be so tempted to leave if they feel that they're being taken care of. And I think nowadays, and especially in the current situation, this is ever more so more important than before, because it's not just about, do I still have a job, or even if it's a bit with less of money or something like that. It's about, like, how did my boss or my employer care about me during this crisis? And depending how you react, people will adjust their own behavior. So you might have surface engagement, but people are maybe looking for another job or waiting to look for another job, or just like saying, I'll just do the minimum and that's it, So that's very important. And line manager have such an important role to play, not just the top management of the organization.
Mark?
Yeah, I think a great point, Sandrine. I would just add this concept of being able to be authentic, to be able to tell your own story too, because everyone's struggling, right? And when I do coaching as well, and the ability for me to be very open about the struggles. There's this great concept that Marshall Goldsmith talks about, is pragmatic optimism, right? Right now, it's very hard, and we should be very open about how difficult it is. We're in a situation that maybe no one has ever been a part of in terms of these huge challenges around the globe. And I think being able to be honest and open about, this is difficult, but what are the things that we can do? And what are the things that we can control, right? And building trust. What I've seen is, it's really interesting because, when we were in our offices or going to work, there weren't some of these very personal discussions taking place. Okay. And now you have an opportunity for people to be able to build kind of that trust in a different way, and just being vulnerable as a leader. And then I think that this concept, there was a great article, I can send it to Ed and maybe share it to everyone.
Thank you.
About humility. a great leader who's talking about, right now, we have to show ourselves and our humility and that we don't have the answers.
Yeah.
But together we can work through this and get to better outcomes. That's where diversity of ideas, perspective. I loved your concept, Stephen, about binary, because you get the worst decisions when you're looking, left or right, one or two. You need to be able to go into the depth of what's the art of the possibility here that we can be thinking about. And you're seeing this in new innovations that companies are coming out with, which is amazing because they're bringing people together in different ways with speed. And even today, bringing people together from all over the world, that's powerful to be able to connect with people and have different perspectives.
Sandrine?
I think the principle also of looking after other people and focusing. I want to come back to maybe a point that Stephen made earlier, that he was getting people to react more when he was explaining how being more human basically also impacts the bottom line. And if I take a step back and I put it into a slightly bigger context, this is why we see a renewed interest in concepts of CSR, ESG, good governance, if you will. And hopefully that organization will not just pay lip service to it, but will really start to realize the value in that. I'd like to reference, there was an article a few years ago, I think it was in the Atlantic, I'm not sure. Al Gore, the former vice president of the US, after he finished his big multi-year tour about the impact of climate change, started to put his money where his mouth was and participated in an investment fund that only looked at investing in organizations where they felt that those companies had better, let's say, a general governance model in terms of people, profit, planet concept. And for 10 years, consistently outperformed the best investment funds on the stock exchange. So he started to communicate about that. It hasn't reached the same level of, I would say, international recognition as his previous work. But I think if people investigate that, they will see that it's not just to be nice, it's also for everybody's well-being, including that of the shareholders. So this is important. And I think that shows also in the day-to-day interactions between management and employee and supports more progressive management, better taking care of employees in a holistic manner and better relationships.
Okay, Stephen, we need your insight.
I agree with that, both Sandrine and Mark. And I would add to that, this is also long-term. If you're building trust, and I think I love when Mark brought that word up, because there's a lot of lack of trust in the world right now, much less in the business world. But by building the trust now with your employees, when we do go back to being back in the office environment, whether it's half the staff comes back one week and half the staff comes back another week, or when we, whatever the different companies are doing in the different states and the different countries around the world, there's going to be a lot of anxiety. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be a lot of pressure. There's going to be a lot of stress. And again, the humility. No one's going to know what to do. No one's really going to know how to handle this. And you've just got to use your human instincts and talents to help people through this. And look, you're going to have situations where I may be one to shake your hand. Let's say Mark and I work for the same company. I put my hand out to Mark, and Mark goes, no, stay 6 feet. I have to respect that with him, but he also can't criticize me. I mean, that's my decision. If I have an attitude of I'm okay, but I have to respect Mark wants us, 6 feet away. We're going to be in a conference together, and everyone wants to practice social distancing. We all have to be a little bit more kind and compassionate with each other, and leaders are going to be role models here. People are going to follow what the leader does. And I think that's so critical, because again, all the pressure that people are under. The other thing, if I can just add one other thing, and this is partly from a societal standpoint that I'm personally concerned about. Research shows that prolonged stress degenerates the part of the brain which controls our reactions. And for instance, we're already seeing in the pandemic increased spousal abuse, increased alcohol abuse, increased binge eating, increased family abuse. Well, people are locked up for 3-4 months. And even in society, you're seeing people, arguing over wearing masks in a supermarket type stuff. When people come back to work, they're going to bring this prolonged stress with them.
Yeah.
And leaders need to be able to see when someone's about to lose it. We need to be able to calm that person down, or take that person outside, or understand that, or just understand it's a one time. Somebody blows up in a meeting and starts yelling and shouting. Okay, maybe that's a one-time incident. That maybe we don't have to report that to HR. Let's get them under control. Now, if the person does it a second time, now it's obviously a safety issue, an HR issue. Things have to be guidelines, not black and white, because we're dealing with people.
Yeah. So Rigoberto, does all this ring bells for you?
Certainly they are. And I would like to share my, what is happening inside Crown regarding our internal process for asking feedback to the clients, which for us is, having a positive feedback for a client is definitely something that opened the doors for more business. So, but what it happens now is that, at this point, I think it's like the hardest part to get a positive feedback, because the stress and all of that things that clients are having are making more difficult to get a positive feedback. So for us, it really represents a challenge to keep providing an excellent customer service. And this is when, we need to adapt to new ways of working, definitely.
Yeah. Mark, what is the best way for a HR leader such as yourself to handle this? Just give them the EAP number, or somehow pull them aside privately for a coffee?
Well, I think each situation is different. So you have to have, go back to what has been said, this focus on empathy and recognizing the challenge that people are having. And, I think it's just knowing what is really driving that. Because sometimes it can be, a situation in the moment that, as Stephen said, someone just has a situation and they're frustrated and they've been on 12 Zoom calls in the day, and they're, they don't get a chance to do anything else. And they're just, they're in a difficult moment. Right. And so I think it is truly, having empathy, listening, and not overreacting, and then talking with the person about, here are some things, some options, right? And give them the opportunity to kind of make that decision, right? One of them might be an EAP, it may be a number of things, right? So I just think that this, putting the human in human resources, I think that's like, and I love, the idea of all the great work that is going on in terms of measurement and, all the things that are happening right now. But I also think that this is a great opportunity for HR leaders to truly model what it means to have that humility, to have that focus, and also to reach out to their leaders too, their executive leaders, because I know, and everyone else on this call knows, it's very lonely at the top, so to speak, right? And sometimes it's difficult to be vulnerable and ask questions. And I found it amazing just to be able to give someone a call and say, I'm just checking in, just want to see how everything's going. If you chat, give me a call,
So Sandrine, in your compensationinsider.com, are you covering this stress thing now?
So not Really, not directly. I tend to focus more on the typical compensation and benefits, but I do see in the conversations I'm having with my readers, the conversations I'm having with people who are reaching out at the moment, that people are starting to reach out for a little bit of different things, and they do ask for advice. So I was hearing what Mark was doing, helping people, who are looking for a job or in transition at the moment. That's not my area of specialization, but just today, as I was trying to it's the weekend for us in the UAE. So I was like, hey, time to catch up on email. And I had 3 emails from people who were former colleagues asking me for help, like, do you know somebody who's looking for a position in this? Or can you help me with my job search? Or how is my LinkedIn profile and so on? So I think that there is a big need at the moment for people who have gray hairs like us and who have that experience of having survived maybe not as deep a crisis as today, because thank God this is once every 100 years. Let's hope for that. But we have survived already the 2008 crisis and maybe the 2000 and the 97 and 87. Okay, so that gives us a little bit of perspective, and I think that's what we see, and it's very important. So that's also something that I'm considering to do as well, more on a pro bono basis to help people. I think.
So
it's
let me
important.
ask you: are companies paying people as they work from home? Are they paying them on a performance basis? I would think that would be very difficult to achieve.
So in terms of, it depends on the kind of job you're doing. There are some, let's say, freelance type of jobs or gig type of jobs that are very task oriented and where you can easily find an outcome, like design me a logo or, write 200 social media posts for me or something like that. Other things are more complex, so then it's maybe not necessarily on outcome in the sense of a direct number, but more like I will produce this for you, and you will say if it's okay for you or not to have it. So that's how I typically work on consulting, long-term consulting engagements. And I think each person is different. On training, when I teach Comp and Ben, it's very simple. I teach, it's so many per training session, and that's it. So much per course, and that's it. So it depends, I guess. But I don't know if it's different in other parts of the world. That's how it is in my part.
Yeah, Stephen Howard, when you deal with people at the boardroom level, how are they impacted? I mean, they're impacted, but it's different, I guess. They're somewhat insulated from the day-to-day, but they have all the bank pressures, never mind interpersonal board level pressures. Am I wrong about that?
No, they're under tremendous stress as well. It's a different kind of stress. As you say, it's not the day-to-day. I mean, they're thinking about, and I've been reading reports that up to 30% of small businesses are likely to go bankrupt as this lockdown shelter-in-place continues. So, particularly when you talk about small, medium, and when we're talking about medium-sized enterprises, you could be talking, 200, 300 employees. Maybe a company was doing, $2 to $12 million a year. I mean, that's a significant, depends on where they're located, but that's a significant impact on the economy, on a couple hundred employees. They're concerned about that. They're concerned about, if they have to close down completely, what's going to happen to them. On the other hand, I think some people are at least taking this opportunity to learn new skills, but also to learn new businesses. I mean, one of the things I find interesting is the number of restaurants a year ago today, if you'd called a restaurant and said, hey, I'd like to do a pickup, I'd like to drive by and can you bring the food out to the curbside? They said, that's not our business. We're not going to do that stuff. And so now they have to. What's going to be interesting is how many of them go back and try and be the old model. Just whenever, like here in California, the restaurants can only do outside dining. And then, when they get to do inside dining at 50% and then 75%. So maybe a year from now, they're back to 100% or whatever. How many of them are still going to be offering that curbside service? Because I guarantee you, a lot of customers, they're starting to think, you know what, this ain't too bad picking up, some steaks and some mashed potatoes and we'll buy a bottle of wine at the supermarket. That's a lot cheaper than paying for the wine at the restaurant. We'll just keep dining at home every now and then. So smart people are going to use this opportunity to build new business models. Not too smart people, in my opinion, are going to try and go back and try and create their own business model. And I think for many of them, that's not going to work.
Yeah. So in Palm Springs, dining outside is problematical, just like in Dubai.
Well, yes and no. We have nice sprinklers above us that kind of throws a mist down on you. But of course, you don't dine outside for lunch. It's here. It's only the evening. When the sun goes down in the desert, it does get cool, as Dubai knows. But yeah, you don't go to lunch.
Actually, in our place, it goes down to 37 at night.
Yeah, that's cool.
Celsius, so it's still a little bit too hot in the summer.
Yeah.
But it's a very good point, I think, on trying to figure out additional business models. It's not that you don't necessarily come back to what you were doing before,
right,
but maybe you add something. Especially for us in the UAE, I mean, food delivery has been huge for many years. I mean, that was never stopped during the lockdown. We couldn't leave our houses, but everything was delivered to us to our doorsteps. So restaurants didn't really stop. Those who wanted to work during the day could still work. They didn't have in-house people, but so I think a lot of entities. I mean, you're right. Some people will be able to adapt and some will not. And it's a shame because it impacts a lot of people. But I think it has just accelerated. The pandemic has only accelerated something which was coming anyway. It would have maybe taken 5 years, 10 years to happen. And now it's going to be 2 years by the time everything is finished. The pandemic is over. We're all vaccinated, inshallah, as we say in my region.
Yeah.
So hopefully they find a vaccine and the life goes back to normal. By then, the transformation will be profound. Right now, it's probably not because we're still in the first few months, but stretch the period for a year, 2 years, it's not possible to come back to what it was before without any change.
Well, just like in my business, as I mentioned last time, we produce live meetings. We had 12 live meetings between last September and the end of this February, and about 1,000 people live across those meetings. New York, Washington, Chicago, Toronto, Seattle, San Francisco, San Jose, LA, San Diego, Phoenix, and now nothing other than this. And so I've had to reinvent. I had to learn how to do this kind of thing. And believe me, I'm still learning. And I thank you for participating in this program. We're expecting Michael Piker, who's global executive, global HR total rewards leader with Philip Morris International. And he's transitioning out into something else currently. So he must have run into some roadblocks or something today because he did want to speak to us about being a global nomad and what that means, and compensation and benefits ties into that, as well as dealing with the psychological impact of that and how it's different from quote unquote normal people. So, and then we were also expecting Angela Lane, who has co-written a book about feedback, Fair Talk, right, Mark? That was that was the title. And I was just communicating with her about 1 hour ago, and then now she's obviously unable to join us at this moment. So we're going to continue this for another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll sign off unless we get those people to come on. So back to you, Stephen Howard, about your research of the better decisions, better thinking, better outcomes. This is a result of a number of years of having these kinds of conversations, right?
It is, and it was prompted by my dad having some early Alzheimer in his last few years, and me being his primary caretaker, trying to understand how to handle him. And then, I'm single. I live alone in California, so I started thinking, well, if there's a DNA component of this, and there is a DNA component, but it's not all of it. What's going to happen to me? But I also learned that really Alzheimer's and stroke and dementia are really lifestyle diseases. In fact, some doctors are calling Alzheimer's diabetes type 3. And so much of what we do in our 30s and 40s, from a weight standpoint, a sedentary lifestyle standpoint, not working our brains, raises our risk for dementia and Alzheimer's. And speaking of the research, when I did the research, and the book came out 18 months ago, so I did the research mostly in 2017 and 2018. The American Heart Association, I believe it was predicting that stroke, Alzheimer's, and dementia would increase in the United States by 67% in this decade. Now, that was pre-pandemic. And that meant that by 2030, 10 million Americans would be suffering from dementia, Alzheimer's, or stroke. I guarantee those numbers are going to go up as a result of what we're experiencing here in the first 6 months of 2020. But the good news is that by lifestyle changes, by getting our weight down, not being obese, by the brain is the biggest user of blood and oxygen. So anything that's good for the heart is good for the brain. So get our weight down, control our blood pressure, control our cholesterol, reduce our stress, which is where I'm focusing on people right now. All these things can help you build long-term brain health or reduce your risk. Can't prevent it, but it can reduce your risk for Alzheimer's, dementia, and stroke. And so that's one of my key messages.
So are you a swimmer? You play tennis out there in Palm Springs?
Well, no, I don't play tennis. So I swim. I swim about 4 days a week, and I do about a 3-mile walk about 4 or 5 times a week too. So I walk the talk, literally walk the talk. But and I've lost 30 pounds in 18 months. So since the book came out, I started putting all this stuff into practice. I had my physical 2 days ago. The doctor says I'm as fit as a horse. He took me off the 2 blood pressure medicines I had been on. My blood pressure's down. My blood work was great. I'm a living example of doing what I tell people to do.
So do you, when you walk, do you walk into the Indian Canyons in South Palm Springs?
I sometimes do, but mostly I just walk along the sidewalk. I've got 3 different routes I take. And that's important too, by the way. Your brain likes new information. So you don't want to walk in the same neighborhood, the same park all the time. So I have 3 or 4 different routes that I take. So that means I'm, constantly looking at different things and, seeing what's happening in different neighborhoods, different parks or whatever. But no, the canyon walks are great. And those are 2 or 3 hour walks, depending on how long you want to do them. But I just walk for exercise. I put the headset on. I listen to a podcast, or I listen to some great 1970s music because I still live in the 70s. So I've still got my rock and roll music on my headset, and I'm just reducing my stress. And it's wonderful. And I do it as the sun's coming up. So it's also very nice to see the sun coming up over the mountains in our desert, lighting up the mountains. And it's quite peaceful.
So in the 70s, if I remember correctly, it was like, "We Are the World." Remember the song, "We Are the World"? Reach out and touch someone's hand.
Yeah, there was all that stuff. Although I have to admit, Ed, if you can remember the 70s, you're better than I am. I lived in the 70s. I'm not sure how much of them I remember.
No, it was the early 70s.
Yeah. And that's not from dementia. That's just from the lifestyle we had in the 70s.
I know, those brownies. Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you about Alzheimer's. You've obviously done some research on this. So is this like a calcium in the brain or something? Is there a way to reverse that?
The doctors can't figure out how to reverse it yet. There, like I said, there is a DNA component to it, but there is calcium. There's plaque buildup. If you think about it again, it's formed mostly from reduced blood flow to the brain. And as I said, the brain is the biggest user of blood, and there's a brain blood barrier, which tries to keep the bad stuff out of your brain. But again, if that leaks or has an issue with it, you're getting bad stuff into your brain. But that's a good part of it. But it's also, the brain's not a muscle, but if you think of it like a muscle, I mean, one of the things my dad did wrong, my dad in his last few years of his life, he would sit around and watch old cowboy westerns on TV. And I couldn't get him to walk. I couldn't get him to go. I couldn't get him to socialize. He would only socialize with family members. And you got to socialize with people outside your family to, talk about things and keep that brain fresh. And he wouldn't do it. And that's, he atrophied, unfortunately, rather quickly at the end. So that's why I'm kind of passionate about that. Sorry if I've gotten on my soapbox here a little bit.
No, it's okay.
I think it's an important issue for society.
My dad passed when he was 86, and the last couple of years, he didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
No idea. So it was strange. And my mom passed when she was 93, and she was still working on the New York Times crossword puzzles with her doctor. But her body gave out.
Yeah.
So it's just strange how it all works. So what about, and I'm going to make light of this a little bit. So I've got a large size head. My hat size is like 29 or something. So people with large heads, do you think there's more room for Alzheimer's, or do you think there's more blockage against it?
I have not seen any research in that. That's a good question. And I'm glad you talked about your hat size. I've been accused of having a large head, but it refers to EGO as having a large ego. No, I haven't seen any research on that whatsoever. But by the way, if I can add one point, we're talking about stress, and this is an important point for leaders to know. And again, it's based on research, but it is a stereotype, and we're all individuals and unique. So I want to preface that. But the research does show that men and women under stress approach decision making differently. Men under stress have a tendency to take increased risk. Women under stress have a tendency, being blunt here, a tendency to be more conservative about risk. So you can imagine a workplace. You got two people on a team. They're trying to make a decision. If they're of different genders, possibly if they're typical or go to their stereotype, one could really, let's do this. Let's look at the opportunity, and the other could be, whoa, let's slow down. Let's not do something. So now you're going to build stress between the people and their decision making just because of their natural proclivities of their genders. And again, it's stereotype. I'm not being biased here, but there's a lot of research into this that says that is a fairly common issue to understand.
Okay, Sandrine.
Okay, so there you go.
Okay. I actually believe that there are lots of factors that do influence how we react to circumstances, and some of them might be gender related, not necessarily from the biology point of view, although there might be, but from the way that we've been raised, and that we have integrated some of society's expectations at the time that we were in our formative years. I mean, obviously, younger generations might react slightly different if they're raised in a different way. I think we were talking of inclusivity at the beginning of the conversation. I would believe that younger generations are probably more naturally inclusive than older generations because they are facing a world which is more diverse. I mean, I remember, I'm almost 50 now. I remember when I was raised up back in France in a mid-sized city, it was all white people. I mean, there were no immigrants that I knew of. I mean, I had to go to karate lessons to meet people that were coming as second generation immigrants. And that was it. In my high school, no diversity whatsoever. Nowadays, kids, they go and it's all mixed. So they have a different way of thinking as well. So I think nature and nurture, we will never completely solve, but I do believe there is an element, yeah.
Okay, Rigo. So what do you think, Rigoberto?
In the point from Stephen, and without stereotyping the gender.
Of course.
But at least in my industry, we usually our mobility coordinators usually are women. That's because they are more sensible. They put themselves more on client shoes. They empathize on needs of the
Right.
trade. So it's a kind of thing that Steve said, that they are a little bit more apprehensive, and then at the end, this is what I was talking before. When they are not able to get a positive feedback, they really feel very frustrated, because they do their best to achieve that, and at the end, under COVID circumstances, it's not that easy. So I think it's like what is happening here.
Yeah, thank you, Rigoberto. I really appreciate your input. Now, this has been a delightful conversation, and let's continue it. Stephen.
Yeah, Ed, just your producer, Paul, has sent us all a chat. So if I can share it with your viewers here, he sent
Yes.
one of my philosophies is it's a good day when you learn something. So I've just learned something. So you give me a good day here is he says that patients with Alzheimer's disease and larger head circumstances, which was defined as over 56 centimeters, experience less cognitive deterioration compared with patients with smaller head circumference, less than 56 cm, even if the degree of brain cell loss is similar. And this is a study from July of 2010. And so thank you, Paul. And I've learned something. So the answer to your question is you're in good shape. Keep that big Texas cowboy size head going.
So, Paul and I were discussing this yesterday for a while about Merv Griffin, the TV guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, Paul, do you want to add something from the background there about Merv Griffin's head size?
Certainly, yes. He had a large head, and he tended to, he also owned a game show empire as well as a security camera company. And he would hire people with larger heads like Pat Sajak, Vanna White. To him, that was an important consideration.
Well, that's new inclusion for you HR people now. We have to do inclusion by head size.
Right.
That is a funny thing. Well, I think we ought to end this while we're all laughing. And
That's great.
So I thank you all for being our guests on Global TV Talk Shows. It's been enlightening and educational. Thank you, Mark Naidicz. Rigoberto, thank you. Sandrine, always a delight. Come back again. And
thank you.
Stephen Howard, your insight has been a blessing here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go get a tape measure now, see what my head size is.
Me too.
All right. So this is Ed signing off. San Diego, Sandrine in Dubai, Stephen Howard in Palm Springs, Rigoberto in Mexico City, Mark Naidicz in the Milwaukee area. And to all of you out there, thank you for watching Global TV Talk Show. We'll see you online.
Thank you, Ed.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye now.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye now.
Happy 4th of July.
You too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Happy
Okay.
4th of July.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.